So, Anna, we're recording?
Yes.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Nelson. I'm Dean of the School of Architecture at the BAC. We have an amazing lecture series this spring 2021 entitled Just Space. And our first lecturer today will be introduced by my colleague, Mark Rukamatu, who is the Director of Special Projects and a faculty member in the School of Architecture. Mark.
Well, thank you, Karen. And first, I'm told to say that this lecture series is sponsored by Eastern Bank. So I'm going to let everyone know that. And just want to say, I'm really thankful to have the honor and privilege today of introducing Natasha Espada. So Natasha is the founder and principal of Studio NA Architects. It's a design and practice in architecture, urbanism, and interior design. Natasha has over 25 years of design and construction experience, both in renovations and new construction for institutional, civic, commercial clients. And she has a commitment to experiential and equitable architecture, the craft of building, and sustainable design. Prior to starting her own practice in 2013, Natasha was an associate principal at Lears Weinsappel in Boston for over 20 years. She's a graduate of the University of Florida and holds a master's degree in architecture from the University of Virginia. In 2020, Natasha served as the president of the Boston Society for Architecture, which is known as the BSA. One of her main initiatives during her presidency was to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion in architecture and work to make Boston a design city by bringing design, art, and architecture to all. Looking back from the perspective that we all have now, I think we could say that it makes sense for 2020 and everyone to be looking at issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. However, Natasha was aware and active on these issues long before 2020 and has been focused on these issues for years now. When she took over as president of the BSA in 2020, she made this issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion her primary focus. I've come to know Natasha serving for the BAC as a representative on the board for the Boston Society of Architecture. All of you may or not know this, but the BSA presidency is a volunteer position. And in a normal year, volunteering to be the president of the BSA is a big commitment. And as we all know, 2020 was not a normal year. Seeing the amount of work and focus and dedication that Natasha put into her role as president was really remarkable for me to see that. And that alone could have been a full-time job. And how she managed to do that along with running her practice, I'm not really sure how you did that, Natasha. It's really amazing. And so, we all know that architecture, it is and can be an all-consuming profession. It takes a remarkable person to do architecture and then take on the role of leadership for our profession with the focus on service to society. And that's what Natasha does. So with that, I'd like to ask everybody here, we're on Zoom, so you can either use your Zoom digital clap feature, you can physically clap, you can mute or unmute yourself however you like, but I'd like to ask you to do that, and please join me in giving a warm welcome to Natasha Espada.
Thank you, Mark, and it's been a true pleasure working on the board at the BSA, and it is volunteer, but I do it because it's very important to me, and it has been very important to me for a long time. I've been very involved for many, many years. And Mark has been a pleasure to work with, as all of the other college reps that are part of the board. We're a board of about 24, and 6 of them are from I think 6 or 7 from the different colleges, and especially this last year, it was great, all of the involvement and all of the connections that were made from academia to the BSA. And as we were just talking right before this, and some of you might have heard, COVID has been a really tough year. This 2020 was a tough year, but there were so many silver linings, and we have to look positively at what we can take from that so that when we move forward, we can take some of that knowledge and incorporate it with what we already knew. But in order to explain all of the work that I've been doing with equity, inclusion, and social justice, I kind of need to tell you a little bit about my background and how that plays into it. So I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I was 8 when my family relocated to Miami, Florida. And my father was a commercial airline pilot, so I was able to spend time with my family back in Puerto Rico. So I have a true connection to my Puerto Rican roots. And then when I started college, my parents relocated to Tokyo for 10 years, where I was able to work for Japanese architect Kazuyoshi Yuzuriha in the summers. And the reason I explain this again is because my culture is important to me, and both my upbringing and my exposure to Japanese and Japanese architecture has shaped me as an architect and as a person, and has really influenced my work. So I started in Studio in 2013 because I really wanted to challenge myself in creating a new type and a new form of practice. When Jay Wickersham was the president of the BSA, he was talking about new and innovative ways of practice, and that's something that I was trying to figure out. So basically, I wanted to work independently and collaboratively with larger firms to create architecture at all scales. And so right now, about 75% of our work is our own, and we collaborate on about 25% of the work, and you'll see some of that shortly. But I was interested in 4 things. Let me see if I can, for some reason, it's not letting me move forward. There. So I was interested really in 4 things, and this is some of the work that we're doing at the firm at all scales, and we're going to talk a little bit about this. I wanted to create a diverse practice. I wanted to design equitable architecture. I wanted to create the highest level of design and focus on the craft of building. And I wanted to create architecture that is grounded in the landscape and supports our environment. And so to create an equitable practice and to do all the work that we're trying to do, you really need an equitable office and with diverse colleagues. And so when I started the firm, and this is for another lecture, but when I started the firm, it was a couple of people that were architects that had been architects with me at Lears Weinzapfel, and I'll talk a little bit about Lears in a second, had decided to do other things because in 2008, 2009, with the market crash, they decided to pursue other things, or they decided to stay at home and rethink what they were doing. And I called them up and I asked them to do consulting for me. And so it started that way, little by little. And it's been 7 years now, and now we're an office of 8. We're about to hire a few more, and it's kind of evolved. But I always think of it as the office culture is very important, and how people think about architecture is really important, because we are a small group and we want to continue that culture. And we have had BAC grads with us, including Tan Tran, who's at the bottom. He was an architect in Vietnam, and he came here and did a master's at the BAC, graduated last year, and I believe he won one of the awards, the Steffian Award, for one of the best thesis prizes, and he's amazing. He's been with us for 2.5 years. So again, kind of just going backwards to go forwards. I just wanted to talk to you about Lears Weinzapfel Associates. So I worked there for 20 years, and I was an associate principal at Lears. They were the 2007 AIA Firm of the Year. And it was an amazing opportunity for me to learn from the best. And I'm sure it wasn't deliberate, but I now realize that I mostly worked at firms with women principals. And so basically, I did internships with Elizabeth Platter-Zyberg and Andres Duani in Miami. I did internships with Meryl Elam and Max Goggin in Atlanta. And I started working with Lears Weinzapfel, which was founded by 2 women who were pioneers, and they ended up winning the highest award from the AIA for design. And so this is really unusual because 17% of the architects are women, through the AIA, and a very low percentage are principals. So I've never really experienced not having women mentors and sponsors. And I also have never experienced being a minority architect, because at the firms I have always worked at, they've been very diversified in race, gender, and culture. So I wanted to show you these projects from Lears because I worked on civic projects that had in a lot of underrepresented communities and with a lot of community input, including the top left is the B2 police station in Nubian Square, where we were investigating how to move forward community policing. So this is the community room overlooking the square. On the bottom right is the first project I just had started working there, and I did interiors for a youth and family center in Blue Hill Avenue, and that had a lot of different cultures represented by the flags, and it impacted the way that we designed the building in an old hockey rink. And then on the left-hand side next to that is a little house that we did in Hartford at Trinity College for the Hillel Group. We worked on 4 cultural houses. And at the top is, a building for Harvard, but it needed community input because it was an administrative building for libraries, the library systems on Mount Auburn Street. But it had, we worked with 4 or 5 different community groups to create retail, a bookstore on the first level, and access through the site. So as soon as I left Lears, I didn't leave Lears because I didn't love it. I loved working at Lears Weinzapfel. I just wanted to see what I could do on my own and how I could move all of these things forward. But the first thing I did was I started teaching it again. And I taught at Northeastern. And this is my class. It was a master's class. And what's really funny about this photo, this was in the area where we did the last crit, and it was hard, so I had to do this panoramic, but all of the men stayed to the left and all of the women stayed to the right. And basically, now that I look at it, it's very interesting to me. It was a great group. It was fairly diverse. The women were very diverse. And I keep in touch with some of them. But it's a representation of what our schools look like right now. And then as we move forward in the profession, we have very little. We only have 0.5% African-American women, and there is 17% of women stay in the field. So this is what school looks like. And then somehow we lose many on the road. And so one of the things that I was always focused on was, or that I didn't know about until I kind of started looking back several years ago, is that I've always been interested in women's issues because women have always been underrepresented. And in the 90s, when I joined the BSA, I became a member of Women in Design. And thanks to mentors and sponsors like Shoping Chin from Payette, who unfortunately passed away several years ago, but left an amazing legacy. I ran the Women in Design building at Build Boston at the time, ABX now. And for several years, I did that, and then it lost its relevance. Women didn't want to practice, didn't want to compete with women anymore. So what I did was I created an exhibit here in 2013, right before I started my practice, called Urban Interventions, Women Designing in Boston, highlighting the fact that women were leading a lot of these projects and were never necessarily given any as much visibility as we would like. I've also really been involved in pro bono work, helping others in underprivileged circumstances. And I volunteered for several years with Horizons for Homeless Children by helping taking care of children in the evening so that mothers could take classes and get counseling to get their lives back on track. And I never knew how that was going to impact. But most recently, with Hurricane Irma and Maria devastating Puerto Rico, I created a group at the BSA because there were many people doing different initiatives, but no one was talking to each other. So in Boston, we have a lot of architects that were interested in helping. And I created a small committee called Post Maria Design Professionals for Puerto Rico to combine efforts with disaster relief initiatives. And so after the hurricanes, there were earthquakes, of course, another disaster. And some of us were certified via post-disaster building safety training assessment. But then COVID hit and we couldn't go to Puerto Rico. And so out of this group, there have been many spin-offs, but the most prominent being Resiliency, that's run by my friend and Janelle Donhale, who's a principal of Perkins and Will. And we're Studio NA is a collaborator. So we put together a program and diagram for community resilience shelters of how do you take existing buildings. You can't build new buildings when a disaster relief happens. So how do you all of a sudden start taking prototypes of buildings and start putting together that diagram that I showed earlier here with the emergency staff, EOC, where the government and the media come in, the shelter, and start creating figuring out how do you take a public market, a public school, or a community center, some buildings that we had designed, others that we had seen locally in areas that were devastated, and how do you start putting together all of that program into existing buildings? And so that's part of the pro bono work. And then, as Mark mentioned, in 2020, I had been on the board of the BSA for 3 years. I had been on committees. I was the co-chair of the Honors and Awards, nominating, and through Women in Design, I was very active. But then I was on the board as vice president for membership, and I was asked to run for president and by the nominating committee. And so I was the first Latina president of the BSA, which is, as some of you know, it's the oldest and second largest chapter of the AIA with about 4,500 members. So I had been, the goal of my presidency, as Mark mentioned, was to make Boston a design city and bring art and architecture to all the neighborhoods in Boston in an equitable way. We were going to look at working with Main Streets and other groups, and then COVID hit. So, but in the meantime, I had been working since the spring of 2018 on a board-created task force on equity, diversity, inclusion, and harassment, which we called EDI+H, in response to the Me Too movement. And I became one of the 4 co-chairs of that task force. It was a 50-person task force, and we looked at how EDI impacted the membership, the firms, and the BSA organization. So we created a matrix of items and divided it into 4 goals, which was advocacy, support, education, and measurement. And in January 2020, as I was beginning my presidency, we created an EDI knowledge community, which is kind of a committee for the BSA. There are about 20 something committees at the BSA. I don't know what the exact number right now, but there was not one on equity, and we didn't have one on LGBTQ. And so I made those two committees, or knowledge communities, and we hosted our first town hall, and then again, COVID hit. And so we quickly created a COVID guide to help all firms, including small firms and who needed support. And we also created programs to give support to firms and to keep students in the field. And Mark was part of that program that we were trying to figure out. We created coffees for students, and out of that, we hired one of the students. So then as we were going to begin the series on equitable guides for practice in the spring, our hearts grieved for, the Blacks in America because of and our hearts grieve for the families of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and others, because it was eye-opening what was happening very visibly, and nothing was happening to stop it. And so in response to that national outrage, the BSA put together a statement addressing racism and racial injustice in architecture and at the BSA. And it indicated that architects, we have to understand that we're perpetuating the systems of oppression, and we need to commit ourselves to designing and building for equity. And it made us reevaluate the whole mission of the EDI group. And we created this equity and practice resource guide. People started calling me, what can we do? And the AIA had put together the equitable guides for practice. And what we did is we took all of that and created this document that just made cliff notes. So it's not our work, it's the work of the AIA with other groups, but we put together cliff notes to help people right away do that. And then we also created a race and architecture series. We hired Artists for Humanity to help us with this logo. And we basically regrouped as an EDI task force with more than 75 people. And we re-identified and kind of reshifted our goals for it. So we created this 2-year series for race and architecture. And one of the series was about education, and Dr. Mahesh Das was one of the speakers, and we were very proud of that. So one of the things that I did do, and I want to read just 2 sentences, is that and I don't know if many of you know this, but when E.M. Young Jr. delivered, he was the director of the National Urban League, and in 1968, he delivered at the AIA National Convention in Portland, Oregon, a speech that still holds today, which is really unfortunate. And one of the things that struck me is that he said, "You are not a profession that has distinguished itself by your social, civic, and civic contributions to the cause of civil rights. And I'm sure this has not come to you as any shock. You're most distinguished by your thunderous silence and your complete irrelevance." He also said, "You are the key people in the planning of our cities today. You share the responsibility for the mess we are in. In terms of the white noose around the central city, it didn't just happen. We didn't just suddenly get the situation. It was carefully planned. And we're going to have people as committed to doing the right thing to inclusiveness as we have in the past to exclusiveness." So I've been very involved with Boss Noma and the National Noma and other groups regarding immigration. And this is something that all of this contributes to the way that we do our work. And so it impacts the way we see the world, and it impacts the way that we see how we're moving forward with our work at Studio NA. And as I mentioned, we do work at all different scales. And one of the things that I want to bring up is, at a large scale, we're looking at a planning project in Needham, Massachusetts. So most of my work has been done in Boston, and in underrepresented communities, including Nubian Square and many, many others. And I lived in Boston, and I moved to Needham about 20 years when I had children. And that's where our office is located, and it's near a train station, and we can have, I can commute to Boston very easily, and people can commute to the office very easily. But for the past 10 years, I've been really involved in the town of Needham, and as well as all of my work that I've been doing in Boston. So it's been happening simultaneously, which is interesting. But I was asked to be on the board of the PPBC, which is the Permanent Public Building Committee, because I do a lot of civic work and public work. And on that committee, I'm the only architect, I'm the only minority, and currently I'm the only woman. And definitely I am the only woman architect that has ever served on this committee. So, and I hope I'm not the last. And so so I review public projects and with the lens of equity and with the lens of many different things that aren't represented in the committee, which, by the way, has I have some amazing colleagues in that committee, but it shows that having my point of view is a completely sees it as with a completely different lens. So Needham is a very white community, and so it's about 85% white. It's the white flight, people that left the city, came here, and they're about out of the 15%, 12% or so are Asians, and there's only about 1,000 Latinx, and I'm one of them. And so the town is trying to evolve and become more diverse. And so I've been really noticing the inequities here, and I spoke up at a town hall meeting that the select board put together. And I was asked to be part of a committee called Needham United Against Racism, NUARI, which I'm working on right now. So it's most of the work in my career has been working in underrepresented communities. Now I'm working in a pretty privileged community, trying to diversify it. So to me, that's I'm going in different opposite directions, but they're both pretty meaningful. And so last year we began a project, and it's in this location here with Needham Planning, and it's to visualize zoning on a critical site in town. The planning department has a board. The planning board is an elected position, and there are 4 to 5 members, I believe. But there are no architects or planners. We do have a planning department, but there are no architects or planners. So they needed someone to visualize how they were changing a very important site. So the first thing that we did was we analyzed the site because we wanted to really think about it in different ways. And one of the ways that we looked at it was we looked at the ecological impacts around the site. We looked at the density, and there's a spine, a very clear spine coming through here. And so then, this is the highway, this is 128, and this is the industrial park. So this lies between the industrial park and these neighborhoods. And the people in the neighborhoods are very vocal. They're very concerned about traffic, and they're very concerned about changing anything. And so we looked at different ways of the amenities that are in the town. And one of the interesting things that we found is transportation bypasses the site. So it makes it not accessible to those who cannot drive to the site, therefore making it somewhat inequitable. So this is something we're talking to the planning department to see if we can start moving the bus route. The blue is the bus route, and this purple is the train route into South Station. And so we also started looking at if they're historic sites. And the reason for this is because one of the things is that the site does not have any historic sites around it, which gives us more flexibility to what can be done there. And so right now it's the location of, this is Channel 5, and this is a location of Muzzy Ford. And it's basically a parking lot, and it's the gateway to Needham right off of the highway. And so right now it looks like this, and it's looked like this for a very long time. And so what's interesting about this is that it shows the highway, how it kind of bifurcates the town. And this is basically this area over here is all the industrial area. Most of this is residential, but this is the spine. And within the spine, this is senior housing. And there's a different proportion to it. And there's also down here is a temple and other commercial. So this site right now is zoned for housing, and it's zoned for warehouses and for other needs. So one of the things that the planning board was doing was reassessing the uses and reassessing what the planning of the site and the zoning could be, because it only has a 0.35 FAR, which is not very dense. And so let me see. Somehow I can't move it again. Oh, there. And so basically, this is what it looks like right now. And it's a parking lot, and it has some trees in front of it. This is the senior housing, but there's no street edge. This is from Gould Street down on the other side, the perpendicular street, where this is the senior housing. But again, it's a parking lot of cars. So we've been working with them for a year and a half now. And this is the gateway to Needham. It's Muzzy Ford, Muzzy Ford is great. It's just, if we have a potential to put a building and create an edge, we definitely would want to do that. And so we started looking at different ways, and we looked at as of right, and we at a 1.0, so that's double to create more density, and a 1.5 or 1.35 actually we came down to for more density. And we looked at different things. It can be R&D, which is the blue. It can be, we needed to fulfill parking requirements, but we also looked at ways of housing is allowed on the site. So how can we create equitable housing, and how can we design it so that and create zoning, which is something that we're still in the process of doing. How do you make sure that this isn't the affordable housing and that this isn't the higher housing? So how do we start making a difference, and how do we start creating a street edge and an urban edge so people can walk and create wellness and allow the seniors to be able to walk across the street and see retail and have retail so that they could also walk. So in general, the purple is the retail. We started coming up with ways that the zoning we weren't designing a building, we were helping design the zoning that would create a more equitable and a more and a street edge and an urban street edge for this, keeping in mind that these buildings need to have the same scale as some of the other buildings in the area. And so we started doing, again, just visioning for them about what proportion it would be, because they started with 5 stories and a density of 1.5 to 1.75. And so now we're down to something that fits more in the neighborhood of single family houses that are on the side, but that allows for potentially multifamily housing. And then this is a view from Gould Street. How can you start creating street edges? How can you start creating opportunities for the middle class? Or we have met the minimum of affordable housing, but how can we start mixing all different socioeconomic position, or groups, so that we can be more equitable as a town? As of right now, I just looked at the paper yesterday, a couple of weeks ago, the median house in Needham is $1.3 million. Yesterday I looked, there were 10 houses that were sold. 3 of them were under $1 million, but the lowest one was 750. The highest one was 2 million. So how could even someone who is college educated and who is white, how could they ever have a starter home in Needham? So how do we give opportunities to have not only the larger houses and the affordable housing, but also something in the middle? And how can, everyone's concerned about the value of their property, and I completely understand, but how do we start creating more equity? And that's something that I'd like to continue working on. And so this would be the new gateway to Needham versus the parking lot as an opportunity. Again, we weren't really designing buildings. We were just designing opportunities for development and for zoning. So related to that, down the street, we're house doctors, we're architects who are on call for Mass Bay Community College. And this is another project where we're working with a college that has all different types of students. It has a really diverse population. And so they, in the sense of community colleges, a lot of them, like this one, adopted old parochial schools. And so how do you create a college campus in a school that was intended for high school students or elementary school students, and when they have very few resources? And so it basically became these 2 buildings that were connected. And so one of the things that we've been working on, so we do a lot of different little projects for them. One was the enrollment center. We've worked on the cafeteria for them to create student spaces because we don't have any student spaces. So one of the few student spaces is this old computer lab, which is in the old chapel. And we've been working closely with the president and the vice president for finance to talk about, okay, so we really need student space and not in a cafeteria. So can we create a student center? So we're working with them on creating a student center in a space that was somewhat underutilized, but still being utilized. How do you transform a computer lounge or a computer lab, now that we have laptops and other things, into a student center that also serves as a way of creating universal design into these classrooms that normally didn't have universal design? So we not only have new stairs that meet code, but we also have a lift inside this this kind of amphitheater that allows for different places and different ways for people to have space on the campus. Simultaneous to that, we're working, because of this and because of all the work we've been doing to repurpose the campus, we did a study for a new health science building. So they have 3 campuses. They have a campus in Framingham for health science that's in an old high school that Framingham wants back. And so they also have the Wellesley Hill campus, which is where the general ed classes, and they have a campus out, I think in Milford, I believe it's Milford, for their auto classes. And so in this health science building, they needed to give the building back to Framingham, to the city of Framingham. And so DCAM is that we did a study that got funding to have a new health science building, 70,000 square foot new health science building. So we knew that we were a small firm. We were not going to be hired by DCAM, even though we are hired by DCAM for smaller projects. So we decided that we were going to partner, and this is one of our collaborations. We're partnering with Sasaki. We went after the project. There were 20, 30 firms that went after it, and we got it. And we got it because we had a good relationship with them. We understood the student body. We understood their spaces. We had a good relationship, and Sasaki had just done a health science building for another community college in the Commonwealth that was a net zero building, and we made for a really strong team. And so what we did is we designed a building that has health science on both sides, but the student support, which is not programmed, we created a place for it on every floor. And we created kind of this knuckle that created the student support, and so that the project could support it financially and programmatically. And so it's 4-story building. On the first level, it's all the blue are all the labs, health science labs, and the orange is the classrooms, general ed classrooms. We have a library on this level, also on the 3rd level, and on the top floor is the dean's office and the faculty offices. And so we basically had a corner of a site because there's a parking lot adjacent. So we were creating a new campus with one building on the corner of 2 very prominent streets, Mount Wade and Franklin Street. And we also, there was a huge parking lot that is shared with Framingham State. So because that was a parking that the MSCBA, the College Building Authority, had leased, I believe, to Framingham State. So we have to share that. So the building is at the corner. We have 2 entrances, one from the public urban side, one from the parking lot side for the students as well. And so this is very conceptual. We have newer renderings, but this is the latest one that I had of how do we create a building that has an impact, that has 2 front faces, one facing the city and one facing the parking lot, and create an entire campus. And so what we started looking at and what we're developing right now, we're in design development, developing all of the corridors and all of the central spaces, and to create student spaces, because a lot of these students, again, very diverse group, they go in at different hours. A lot of them work. They need, between classes, they need a place to stay and they don't have anywhere to go. There's not a lot of food around there. They need a little student lounge with a cafe. So how do we incorporate that into a building that doesn't really have that as a programmatic element? And that has been really interesting. And how do we make it net zero? So how can we have a building that is very limited in budget and in program, and how do we still make it net zero? And working with BR+A and Sasaki, and we're slated to, we have geothermal wells, we're going to have electrified systems, and so very proud of that. So related to that, we've also do a lot of work with City of Boston, and the Mattahunt School also has a community center, which is where kind of this photo where you're standing to take the photo. Several years ago, had an envelope. They had to redo the envelope of the building, and they worked with the community and they picked out these vibrant colors, and they really kind of rejuvenated this building. And when the mayor came to this space, at the community center, and it looks very bright here. I don't know how we got it to look that bright, but it's very dark. It barely has any natural daylight. To open the building, he's like, this building, is in terrible condition and has been. So we started working with the City of Boston with a very small budget. How do we just do some interior improvements just to the lobby and a couple of other spaces? Since then, it has developed into, we need to make the entire building accessible. We need to touch every single space in the building. And I think this is great. It's a community that really needs it. It's not only, so this is some of the ideas that we've had. We're developing this, and we're in construction documents now, and we're developing, they're adding all new sprinklers. The building didn't even have sprinklers. So the city has made a huge commitment to this group. And so we used to be a theater and performing arts space that then became multi-purpose room. And so we're looking at different ways of creating a palette so that it's not only used by the elementary school, but it's also used by teens in the after school. How can they start? We create a clean palette for them so that they can start doing artwork and start making the building their own. And this was the teen room. And now we're creating a teen room again. This is a place for artwork. This is a place where teens would want to go. Trying to putting glass on the door to bring in natural daylight. It's basically very, very dark. So how do we create high level design architecture that is equitable and that brings people in and creates community, and it doesn't feel like leftover space. Another project, and this was working with BPDA. We were also working in the city, and this is the China Trade Building. It's an old, beautiful building right across from the Chinatown train station, subway station. And basically the 5th floor was the floor that we were going to be renovating for DCF, for the Department of Children and Families. So BPDA, the city, only owns very few buildings, 12 Channel, this one, and a couple of others. They were going to be giving this building to, renting it or leasing it to DCAM to support DCF. So we had 3 clients, DCAM, which is the state, DCF, the Department of Children and Families. So how do you create, so basically it's offices, and it's a lot of attorneys' offices, and they need to be private. And then there's also Corey checks, and then there's a kids fund department, but you have little kids that are coming with their families here to talk. And we had a central core where we had a lot of mechanical systems, but there's a really nice atrium and a lot of natural daylight. So we focused all of our budget and our effort. I mean, we made nice offices, but really into this area here, which are shared spaces, which is the conference rooms where these kids would come with their families so that they felt important and they felt warm. So we basically had to maneuver around all the mechanical systems. And so we created a folded plane ceiling that actually was able to hold the mechanical systems, bring in maximum natural daylight, create warmth in the space, and make it special so that these kids felt like they weren't just, that they meant something. And so we basically worked on trying to figure out how to jam all the systems in a very efficient way, and then bring in natural daylight. And so this is what the space looks like. And so we did this with a very limited budget. We put the money in the right places. We worked with them on the furniture, and we renovated, some aspects of the windows. We ended up eventually redoing the lobby space as well, and the stairs that hadn't been renovated since the 70s. And so this whole ceiling of these folded planes created this really kind of larger and smaller intimate spaces, including a staff lounge, and including, conference rooms where we used glass that was more translucent than transparent to bring in natural daylight, but to also create spaces of all sizes. And finally, just checking time, finally, even for private clients, we're doing projects that we feel are benefiting the student population or society in a larger way. So Tufts University has the Barnum Hall right in the center of their Medford campus. And Barnum Hall is one of the oldest buildings on the campus by P.T. Barnum. It used to be a museum. And here's a diagram. It used to be a museum from 1883 where Jumbo, the elephant, was in. There has 2 wings, the East Wing and the West Wing from 1894 and 1935, all different construction types, so nothing is simple. And then in 1964, there was a lab building. As you can see here, this building has 3 stories, this building has 4 stories, and the buildings were not connected. You have to go through so many mazes of stairs. And so one of the things that we were hired to do was they were changing, Tufts built a new science building. So they were basically changing this from a science building to an office administration and arts and theater building. So it had like 8 or 10 different groups going into the building. But the main thing is they had 1 elevator, and they had issues with universal design where they couldn't go from one building to the other. A lot of the spaces were inaccessible. And so we basically worked with them to create a central core to create egress that was simplified, wayfinding, and connected the two buildings with stairs and ramps. And so this is the plan of the first level. As you're coming in, this ramp we were not doing any exterior work. This work and the landscape work will be done probably in the next couple of years. And so that has already been planned, but the work was inside, and we brought different departments to College of Civic Life. We created a lobby to be shared by the entire building, and we created this area here where you have stairs and ramps to connect the two buildings. And we updated also all of the two auditoria. And then on the upper level, this is an area for film, a film studio, and this is an area for arts and film studio. So all of these labs had to be completely gutted, all new systems, but we were able to make sure that we created these series of ramps that connected and stairs that connected the two. And so, and this is at the lower level. You can come in straight from grade. And again, we put a new lift at this location, and these are also art studios and film and media studios. And so basically this is a section cut, how we were able to connect with ramps and stairs the two buildings, as you can see, 3 stories versus the 4 stories. And so this is the final design of this is the lobby, the main lobby at the first level. And then as you come in, this is going into the classroom. This is Tisch College of Civic Life, and the elevator is here with the ramp. And then this is the series of ramps and elevators. This is the series of ramps and stairs that we had to redo. And we added gender-free bathrooms. So equity can come in many different faces. And in this case, it was a universal design. And so this is a view now as you're coming off of the ramp into the new lobby. And this is at the lower level, which is also a secondary lobby that also brings natural daylight and has all new materials. So we were just hired to do a systems project where we were redoing 2 lobbies, and it became a universal design project that really made a huge impact to all the students on campus. And I think this is it. And I think I made my time so we can have some time for questions.
Thank you very much. Everyone, maybe give a round of applause virtually, do some digital clapping. Thank you so much, Natasha. That was really, really amazing. Great to see all the work. So I put in the chat, if you want to ask a question, you can type into the chat and I will field the questions. And if you want to ask the question yourself, just type in ask question, and then you can unmute and ask the question yourself. So I'm going to go.
A question about Immigrant Architects. Yep. Here, do you want me to jump on that one first?
Sure, go ahead. Yes, that would be great.
I was a contributor for the so I don't want to mess up her name, but Katerina was also one of the contributors. So I wrote an article for one of the chapters. I don't even know what it's actually called, but for the Immigrant Architects, and it's let me see what it's called. It's the Immigrant Architect. I wrote it down here. Coalition, and it was created by. Funny that we talk about this because Shoping Chin from Payette was one of the founders of the Women's Leadership Summit, and so she and a group of others, Carol Wedge, Carol Burns, and others, Heather Taylor, but Shoping was really the ringleader in this, and unfortunately she passed away several years ago, and we created a scholarship so that women who didn't have the means to go to it became a national conference. We started it in Boston. It's never been held in Boston, which is terrible, which we're trying to get it to here. But it's been all over the nation now. And we started with, 12 people, and now it's like 750 women get together every 2 years. There were women that wanted to attend and their firms wouldn't pay for it, or they didn't have the means to do it. So we created a scholarship in Shoping Chin's name. And the first year we gave out 7 awards, I believe. And one of them, Graciela Carrillo, who is an architect, a woman architect from New York, ended up winning it. And she is the one who created the Immigrant Architects Coalition and asked me to write a piece about how do you start a firm for immigrant architects. And so I do want to say that out of that Women Leadership Summit, out of the 7 women, I believe 4 Graciela was the president of the Long Island chapter of the AIA. 4 are presidents of their chapters, and the other 3 are board members of their chapters. And this happened in 3 years. So that goes to show you that, and I see Judy Nitsch here, and she knows because she's been involved with it, and she's been a huge supporter of it. That in general, it goes to show you that a little goes a long way. If women or minorities or anyone is mentored and sponsored and has support, they can reach a really high level of of what they can do in a very short period of time. And so I just wanted to say that, because for those of you who feel like, oh, it takes so long to do this, no, you just have to start working at it and find people that can support and mentor you and sponsor you, which is very different than mentoring. It's putting you forward, and Judy Nitsch has been one of those for me, and for many, many people here in Boston. So anyway.
So
Yeah, thank you for contributing.
My pleasure.
And so since you were mentioning Judy Nitsch here, Judy actually just sent a question in to ask you. She first want to say hello. Judy, you can unmute and say this too if you would like.
So hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, there were other questions, so I figured I would just send it in the chat. But Natasha, as you and probably most of the people on the call know, I'm vice chair of the Board of Trustees of the BAC. I'm wondering, how can the BAC help you in the various initiatives in which you're involved to help move things along?
I think one of the things that Mark and the group of board members, we were talking about, how do we connect the BSA with the schools? And I think that is really important, because we have NOMA and NOMA, the student version of NOMA, and NOMA at the BSA, and all of these different groups that are working independently. And so in general, I think having all of these groups working together will make a bigger impact. And I would like to, so my presidency year is over. I'm on the board for another year, and I'm still working on EDI. We're still working on the race in architecture. So how can we help? How can we make connections with the schools so that, I'm talking about the BSA part, and individually, we work with different students, and we could possibly create opportunities, for maybe there are different ways of the work that we're doing that we could do a studio on it, or something to that effect, to get different ideas. But through the BSA, I feel like it's an even bigger network of people that are trying to do work in equity. And I feel like there's a disconnect between the schools and the BSA that we've been trying to join in different ways. And so I think there's so many possibilities. And during the education piece, the education race and architecture lecture or seminar that was given, where Dr. Mahesh Das was part of, and Monica Ponce de Leon and many others, we talked about how do we help with entrepreneurship, right? Because part of the issue with equity is that people go to school and then they go to firms and they don't see anyone that looks like them. And then they decide that they're going to do something else because they don't see a future in it. So how do we create a community to help people get the experience that they need for entrepreneurship? Because a lot of the firms, to tell you the truth, most of the firms are small firms. 80% of the firms are small firms or so. So there are opportunities for people, to design in different ways to bring their culture and their inspiration into it. And there's enough work for everyone to go around, but we need people to support, mentor, and sponsor people for entrepreneurship.
Great.
Can I jump in and just add one thing to that, Natasha, which is that people shouldn't be afraid to ask people for help. People are available, but I remember when you came and talked to me about starting your firm, and you talked to a lot of people, and people are always happy to help, but many people are hesitant to reach out.
I agree. And the other thing that I found is that sponsors and mentors are like friends, right? You have different friends that you go to because they have different strengths and for different reasons. And so the same way with sponsors, I have several sponsors, men and women, who have different expertise or can give me different advice. And I think that that is really important. You don't just necessarily have one person that you go to all the time. You have a network of people that support you. And so I think that was really useful. Judy helped me. Judy, as most of you know, Judy ran an incredibly successful business that has grown immensely in the past couple of years as well. And she was a mentor when I was thinking about the business aspect of it and all of it. Others have been mentors when it comes to academia and how do I get back into teaching and how do I do. So I think you have to be open. And if you don't know someone, you should ask your professors, you should ask your friends, because you need to make an effort to be connected. And once you're connected, you need to make an effort to also be involved, right? So the mentor can't just give and you receive. You also have to, we learn a lot from each other. And so you have to be committed to that relationship as you would a friendship for it to evolve, for you to be able to evolve.
So there's a question that was asked like very early on. So I just want to circle back to that one. It's kind of a question that I think a lot of students could learn a lot from. But they were asking about the gender-free restrooms in large buildings. How do you do that?
You have to find pockets for it. So we work with, and we're doing that in a new building right now too. And so you basically have to create opportunities for it to happen. So there might be a room, there was a photo lab room in the Barnum Dana renovation. And we made sure that it was the right dimensions, not directions, to make it happen. So but it has to be a commitment with the client. And the more you know about equity and the more you educate yourself about it and the more you're interested in it, and your clients can become partners in that. And you need to plan. And planning as a campus or planning as a building to see how you can make everything as universal and as equitable as possible. So I think they're becoming more normal now, the norm now to include them in programming. But it's something that if you have a really good idea, you should bring it forward and think about the client. I mean, the client is looking for good ideas as well. It may not always work on every project, but you always have to try. I see here about the design process. Do you want me to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's what I was going to go to next.
Yeah, so we work in I'm very collaborative, and we work in a very, and sometimes I hate that word because it's overused, but we work very in tune with each other. And that's why it's really important that we hire people that have a similar culture. So we work with our team. We have super talented people and that went to all different schools. So, Tan went to the BAC and he went to school in Vietnam. We have many others that went to school all over the US. And they bring not only, they bring a different perspective to it, but best design wins always. We have, because we're small enough, we can work in Zoom in a way that still kind of keeps the culture of the firm going. And so we work. What's interesting about being in COVID is that we used to work work together, go away, work independently, come back, pin up, sit around the table, talk about it, take out trays, do all that stuff. Now we're basically doing it on Zoom and on other platforms. And we're actually designing as we're seeing it, form at times or at evolve. And that to me is kind of another way of keeping the culture going. But we basically do a lot of analysis. We look at a lot of precedents. We get a lot of people, like right now, the whole firm is looking at something. We're brainstorming on something for 3 hours and we're going to meet at 2:00. And we need to get ideas out really quickly. And then those ideas, best ideas win. We need to do some sketches. We need to send it to the client by the end of the day. And so I'm about doing the best work that we can do. And in some cases, my ideas are good. In some cases, they're not. The other ideas are much better. And so I feel like you need the flexibility and kind of be open-minded to think about the project and not think about individuals in the firm, but look at us as kind of a collective of ideas. And there has to be a lot of trust in that. Most people, and when I was at Lears Weinzapfel, most of us were there for a very long period of time. And we all know each other really well. And so we're kind of, I can say right now that most of the people that started our firm, the majority have stayed, for long pieces of time, for long amounts of time. And I think that's part of it, is the respect, the mutual respect and the collaboration that we've been able to create as a culture for the firm.
That's great. Thank you. So we're at time. There was one question in here I would like to maybe we have a quick response to. That was asked, you said that we lose a lot of minority Black women within the profession. They would like to know what are your thoughts on this, and how can we really foster more to kind of really promote and help within this kind of area?
We lose a lot of Black men, Black women, and Latino men and Latino women in general in the profession, though Black women being the smallest percentage that is left in the profession. And I think it's, again, I've been working with Boss Noma, which is super energized right now, very energized, very involved with a younger group of minority architects. And I think minority architects want to see diverse leadership. So one of the things that the firms can do is start really being inclusive about promoting a diverse leadership. And so if you don't see yourself in that firm, you won't stay there, and it might actually discourage you from staying in the profession. And so I think one of the things that we need to do is to start thinking about the firms, where we want to go with the firms and how we want to attract them. We also have to be actively looking there aren't so many Black architects in this area as there are in other parts of the nation. We can also do some recruiting, but we really need to mentor and sponsor them, because if you don't see yourself in the profession, most likely, and you don't see a future for yourself in the profession, most likely you won't remain in the profession. And it's not one of those professions that are so well paid that you would remain in it just for the money. And most of the people that are in it have a lot of passion about it and feel let down if they don't see a path for themselves in what inspires them. So I think it's promoting everyone, including, but mostly really supporting those minority and women architects to make sure that they know that they matter and that they have a chance of becoming leadership.
I think that's an excellent point. And thank you, for making this visible to us, by, doing it yourself through the leadership that you've provided within the community and everything. So we really appreciate it. And I think this is a really great kind of and inspiring for students, at our school to see. So with that, everybody, I'd like to thank Natasha very, very, very much for this lecture. Maybe another digital applause round for everybody. Thank you very much, Natasha, for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. It was really great.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be the first one here for this session and at the beginning of the year. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, and that I hope that someday I won't have to talk about it, because it will just be part of the way that, that our profession moves forward. And so thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. And for all the students here, I think everyone has studio to go back to for part of the intensive week. So have a good studio session for the afternoon, and we will see you all later.
Thank you, Natasha.
Thank you.
And I'll stay on for a moment here.